right? You're sharing the trail with a lot of hikers, you're sharing the trail with bikers and even equestrians. So being able to use your trail etiquette is crucial here in Sedona, just because you're going to have to. I mean, there's people out there. Um, so knowing the right of ways, being super polite and making sure that mountain biking maintains their access here, because the last thing we want to do is give mountain biking a bad name here in Sedona. So for
Hey,
sure.
thanks again for joining me today, Evan. Uh,
Yeah,
Evan, and just a quick background for people listening, we took a lesson from Sedona Mountain Bike Academy last year, Julie and I, and we've been riding for, I don't know, embarrassed to say, like almost 18 years, and been doing a lot of things wrong. And that was the humbling experience of learning that, there's been years of bad form or just lack of knowledge that's not made me a better rider, even though I've been putting in more years on the bike and more miles on the bike. It's really going back to the basics on a lot of this stuff. And the only regret that I have about the lesson is I should have taken it 10 years ago.
mm,
And ever since then, I've been such a big um, preacher of mountain bike lessons or just lessons in general, to not only just improve sport but safety, enjoyability on the trail. So you're just like, you're not struggling with some of these things that you're hitting over and over again, and you have to get off your bike and walk. You can actually ride the trail that's technical or hard. So thank you for that incredible lesson. Julie and I have both taken so much of it that we wanted to have you on the podcast to share some of the topics and tips, and encourage people to consider taking a lesson. Just didn't met regardless of where they are in their journey and their individual sport. In this example, we'll talk about mountain biking. So thanks for joining me today.
yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm curious about how long you've been down in Sedona. What inspired you to start giving lessons? What were you doing before Sedona Mountain Bike Academy? Walk
Sure.
us through how you got started.
Yeah, no problem. So Sedona, I've been in Sedona now for 4.5 years. And like I told you before, I moved here from Vail, Colorado. And that's kind of where I really picked up mountain biking, was when I moved to Colorado. But prior to Colorado, I think the teaching seed was planted at an early age. I come from like a long lineage of teachers. My mother was a school teacher, my sister was a school teacher, and it's just kind of like how you communicate within the family. But actually, at the time, I was a young tennis player. So my first job in high school, I was a tennis professional, or I was a tennis pro at a country club. So I was teaching and learning how to communicate in that environment. Um, so I always I just felt at home in that type of scenario.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated college, that's when I was like, I'm moving to Colorado. I'm picking up mountain biking because it's what I always wanted to do. I just couldn't because of tennis.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, once I dove headfirst into mountain biking, I knew I wanted to be in the industry, but I didn't know where I fit in. I wasn't sure, so I just started getting jobs here and there. I worked for IMBA in Boulder, um, and that gave me a really wide vision of what the mountain bike industry is, because they have their hand in everything from
Right.
trail advocacy to they even have an instructor certification program. So I saw that at the time, and I really could kind of pick and choose like what avenue I wanted to go into. Um, and yeah, so when I finally moved to Sedona, um, I started working at Thunder Mountain Bikes, which is or formerly known as
Over
Over
the
the Edge.
edge.
Yeah, formerly known as Over the Edge. Um, and I became the general manager there. And from there, I was like, okay, this is great, but it's not exactly what I want to do. So I got a job with Hermosa Tours and I was guiding. And then it was like, oh, that light went off. And I was like, oh man, this is definitely more my path, more where I belong in the industry. So I was guiding. And when I was guiding, I ended up teaching a lot just because people would naturally be like, hey, how do you do that? How do you ride that feature?
Yeah.
So I just started teaching during my tours, and I was reminded that I love it and that this is kind of, my place in the world. And
Yeah.
so we started looking into ways on how we could make it a reality in Sedona, and it was just kind of right time, right place. There weren't a lot of people doing it at the time, and yeah, we can go into that later. But it's just, yeah, we love what we do, and I get to teach on my bike every day. It's pretty sweet.
Absolutely. And what an amazing way to like find what you love and let natural progression. And sometimes it's not easy as just like a straightforward clear shot at exactly what you're going to do, but it's so great that you found your passion for teaching or knowing your skill. I was just like you're good at it, because there's a lot of incredible mountain bikers that can't break down what exactly they're doing to be able to translate that into how to actually improve. And I think that's the big differentiator in someone that's a coach and is a professional coach versus just a friend that's a really great mountain biker. And do they have the patience? Do they have the ability to break down what's happening to be able to translate that into a step by step natural progression of how to ride these features and skills?
That's totally true. I mean, some of the best mountain bike coaches out there, they're not the best riders. They're not the pro enduro racers. They're the best communicators, and they can identify skill errors. They can see these things. So it has a lot more to do with just how good you are on a bike.
Absolutely. And you guys have several different coaches that you guys can partner people up with. I love that you guys have an option to go with a female coach if that's what the customer wants, because a lot of times it can be intimidating to learn from guys or just the different communication methods. So you guys have, what's your team like now? How many people do you have?
Yeah, so we're really lucky being in Sedona. I mean, it's a riding mecca, and because of that, we have a lot of seasonal people coming through to ride, and we are just in a lucky position where we're able to latch onto those riders through the bike shop. And we currently have 10 other
Wow.
instructors on our team. I mean, I will say a lot of them are seasonal, so some of them are
Sure.
gone during the summer or gone during the winter. um, but yeah, if we were to gather everyone, we have in between 10 and 12 people actually,
That's
who
incredible.
can coach from time to time for us. So pretty
That's super
cool.
cool. What's so to date, like if you had to guess over the 4.5 years, how many individual lessons do you think you've done? If you had to guess, I know it's probably hard.
Yeah, my mind doesn't even keep track of these things, to be honest, but I'll give you just an idea of my schedule, and then we can kind of
Yeah.
figure it out. So this past spring, we have a after school bike club program where I
Mhm.
coach 4 afternoons a week. So I'm teaching elementary school, middle school, and high school 4 different days during the week, and then I'm coaching private lessons and clinics on top of that. So on average, I would say average, I'm coaching 5 days a week, um, and potentially double lessons on some of those days. so
Wow.
so it's
So
it's a lot.
like
It's a lot of
20
coaching.
lessons a week at least. And you're
Well,
going,
I don't know about 20. I would say, you know, if you're counting the youth program, I would say, 10.
okay. All right.
10 lessons a week or something like that.
Yeah,
So
so that's still like 500 plus lessons per year. I guess what I'm trying to get at is you're riding a lot when you're out there. It's keeping you in such incredible shape too. You're getting so
yeah,
many miles.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely an active position.
That's incredible. You get to get out and do what you love every day. Out of those, you know, thousands of lessons when you think about it over the years, what are some obvious things that stick out? Like, not to make a top five list, but some common things that you've come across over all that time that you feel like either beginner, intermediate, or advanced level, or you can split them up for beginners, intermediate, or advanced separately, or uh, if it applies to all of them, some common things that you see people doing incorrectly that could
Mm.
make a big difference by taking a lesson, or that you can help point out that a person's not aware of?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think I mean, it definitely just depends on the individual, what they've learned throughout their journey as a mountain biker. But for beginners, I mean, the main fundamental skill that we harp on is always body position, right? Having the right ready position. And it's so important because just similar to you, I had been biking for 20 years and then I took my first lesson. So I realized how many things that I had been doing wrong, and the main thing was my ready position, what position I am in all the time as I'm approaching a feature or I'm approaching a corner. It was incorrect. So we try to dial in where your weight distribution needs to be, what your body needs to be doing while it's on the bike as a beginner. And then the second error that I see all the time with beginners is not using, if they have a dropper post, not actually using their dropper post effectively or not using it enough.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of like a home run almost every lesson is getting to get them to actually drop their post more often, and that allows you to have a lower center of mass. When you have that lower body position, your confidence goes through the roof, you're more stable, you have more traction, you're way more balanced. Finding that lower position is just like the home run with beginners. And I think
Absolutely.
you found that with your lesson as well. It's just totally confidence inspiring.
Yeah. And then you go into, uh, I think a lot of times intermediate or advanced level riders are a bit more hesitant to maybe take a lesson. Maybe there's some ego involved, or you feel like you've just been doing it long enough, you've seen enough that you don't need any more coaching. But what are some of the moments or things that come out of like advanced riders? So what are some of the things that they're looking for?
Yeah.
Maybe specifically in Sedona, because you have so many difficult features there. So
Mhm.
uh,
I know. I love teaching intermediate and advanced uh, level lessons because basically you're right. They all have the mentality of like, I've already learned that. But then I always revisit a little bit of fundamentals and always revisit the ready position. And 90% of the time, people are blown away with what they didn't know. So
mhm.
advanced riders, I mean, they can really benefit from stepping back and revisiting the fundamentals. But with that said, I think for intermediate riders, the next step, once you kind of dial in the right body position, is getting bike body separation. So being able to be dynamic with the bike. Um, what you think you're doing isn't always the case, and so we do a lot of video analysis with our students to see how much are you leaning the bike over, or are you actually getting into that correct forward position on the climb. So dialing in that dynamic position with intermediate riders would be, I think, the main skill that we focus on. And then for advanced riders, we like to spend a lot of time at the bike park,
Mhm.
and we introduce the theory of pumping. So we spend a lot of time at our local pump track, and being able to ride a trail like a pump track with dynamic weight shifts and using pressure control in the corners. Um, those are more advanced skills that we kind of harp on, and we introduce to advanced riders, because a lot of advanced riders have just been riding trail for years and they don't understand how dynamic you need to be on the bike as you ride through. So
That pump track was a game changer. I wish I had that as a kid. And all these kids coming out that are like have this in their neighborhood, they're going to be such incredible riders in the future.
I know,
Uh,
if you ever watch a BMX rider ride a trail, it's a beautiful thing because they know how to pump through a trail, and that,
yeah,
it's such a great skill to have. So yeah, we
yeah,
work.
absolutely. And if you can visualize it, yeah, you're at the peak of a roller or something, and then when you get to the top, you can pump your way down on the descent to reduce the amount of pedaling you have to do, which is it's not less work necessarily, but just the way you flow through a trail really changes, and it's hard to describe, but it's so enjoyable. I feel like it really gets you into like that state of flow of riding, so much more and you feel the trail so much more instead of just like struggling with it. You're using the trail features to
Mhm.
I guess it's like riding a wave, you know? And when you get to the
Yeah.
top, you just want to like descend down it and use it. And when you need to go up, you compress at the bottom. It's really incredible. So if you have a pump track close to wherever you're living, or if you're visiting some of these places like Moab and Sedona, they have pump tracks or bike parks. It's a great place to practice and just go out there, take a bunch of turns and just see what that feels like. And I think a lot of times they even have like, and I think Moab is doing a great job of that, putting small drops in so you can practice drops over and over again without
Hmm.
having to try it on the trail. So
That's right.
whoever's building these parks, keep going because they're amazing.
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, the pump track, for anyone who is not familiar with the pump track, I mean, I really feel that they are inefficiency magnifiers, right? If you're not efficient in a pump track, you will not be able to maintain your speed. So being able to maintain that speed and actually gain speed as you work through the pump track is the goal. And there's no way to do that except spending lots of time at the pump track and learning what it's like to pump through. So
Yeah, absolutely. What do you are you guys getting a lot of are you seeing the growth in mountain biking as a sport in general from beginners as people are seeking to get outdoors more? Outdoor recreation in general is blown up. You know, hiking has become one of the most popular things to do, and it's a great thing since the pandemic. And mountain biking, I think cycling in general became a really popular sport, and I can see the same happening with mountain biking. With beginners that are looking to get into the sport, what are some common challenges or fears that you see uh, with beginners, and what are some easy ways to overcome, you know, the mental side of mountain biking and overcoming the fear of falling, for example? And what are some of the other things that that you see as common challenges or mental roadblocks when someone's trying to get into mountain biking?
yeah, I think that people try to take too large of a step when they're beginning. You know, they don't use progression, and
Okay.
that's kind of what we teach, right? If you want to hit a 10-foot drop, a lot of riders are like, okay, well, let me go hit a 7-foot drop and whatnot, and that's just too big, right? You need to work on dialing in the right form on a 2-foot drop, then dialing it in on a 4-foot drop, and so on, and just taking those small steps to get to that 10-foot drop. So I think people bite off more than they can chew immediately, right? They don't
Hmm.
know how to properly, um, you know, improve at a at a slower rate, I guess.
Take it easy.
So
Yeah.
yeah, take it easy. So use logic to appeal to your progression, right? The other thing too is study the skill that you're working on, right? Really understand what it is that you need to do to improve. And if you don't really understand how to corner, you're not going to be able to corner, right? So watching those videos, having a coach, there's lots of ways that you can really have a deeper knowledge of that particular skill. So that's another way to help out. And
Hmm.
then as you mentioned, the mental aspect is equally important. So positive self-talk, visualizing, if you're going to hit that drop, visualize it going well, what it's going to feel like before you go do it. There's lots of ways to get your mind right before you attempt the skill.
That's huge. Yeah, visualizing is such an underrated, and I think athletes and like Olympians, they do this all the time, and you see yourself succeeding instead of thinking that you're going to hit a tree or you're going to fall. Visualize yourself rolling through it, hitting the jump, or riding over that feature and successfully cleaning it. Because when you're actually doing it, you felt like you've been there before. Is that the kind of the secret?
Totally, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think
those are super helpful.
yeah, I mean, as you progress as a rider and you start doing bigger and bigger features, that's going to become really important, because you need to get your mind right in order to in order to land successfully. So
Absolutely. This is probably not. This is not going to be sponsored by any mountain bike company, because
Mm.
they probably don't want this answer, but what percent of riding skill do you feel like is the bike versus your skill itself? Because I personally feel like it's like 70% skill, 30% bike. Of course, the bike's going to help you in the future, make you like way better when you get better and better. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's wait, are you saying it's mostly bike or skill? I'm sorry.
Skill. I'm saying
Yeah,
70% skill.
for sure, skill. I mean, some of my friends who ride, I mean, they can ride a fully rigid bike better than most people ride a downhill bike, with all of the suspension and all the gadgets. It's definitely the skill of the rider, 80%, 90%. Um, but I will say that the new bikes these days, it's pretty nice. It's pretty
They
nice
do
to
help a
have.
lot. They do
It's
help a
nice to
lot.
have the geometry and the confidence of a slacker head tube angle and a dropper post. There are certain things that are crucial to your success with
Yes,
skills. I will say that, but um, even with a fully rigid bike and a straight post, I've seen people do some incredible things. So, I-
absolutely.
80%.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to pitch that before you just go out and get a new bike, and you think that's what's holding you back. Invest in a lesson, or take a friend out, or someone that really knows what they're doing, and try to focus a bit more on the skill. You can even watch YouTube videos and go out there and practice on one thing, because you'll be surprised how much you can improve just by focusing on the skill. If that's where you're going for, if you just want the confidence, whatever that might be for you. Of course, having fatter tires, a dropper seat post, and more slack and suspension, you're going to get over some stuff. But it's not,
Mhm.
you can save some money there too, to invest in the skill. That doesn't matter what bike you're riding, you're going to have a better time.
Yep.
Um, so you're 4.5 years in Sedona. You've probably ridden every single trail that exists there. And this is probably a loaded question, but you could do your best to answer. But if you're on your days off, you're just going to get out and ride. What are some of your favorite trails to ride, and why?
Yeah, it's like what flavor do you like? It's kind of hard to say what
Yeah.
it depends what I'm in the mood for, but I would say if I'm in the mood for like more of a flowy, pedally experience, just kind of like
Hmm.
tune the mind off a little bit and get into that meditative state. I would say out in West Sedona, there's endless opportunities. So that's going to be Gardner, Outer Limits, Mescal, Chuckwagon. It's all pretty much intermediate riding.
Hmm.
So just going out there, and there's over 100 miles of single track out there, so you can just go forever, and there's nobody out there too, so you can really just kind of zone out and enjoy yourself in nature. And so that's a special experience. But if you want to take it up a notch, I would say my favorite technical trail would be Highline, just because it
Okay.
has everything. It has the fast flowy parts, it has the slow technical. um, you end up by the river. It has and then an impossible climb up out, so it tests everything that you have as a rider. And it's definitely, I think, Sedona's signature trail, you know
Yeah. I have yet to hit Highline. So
uh,
next time I come out, I'm gonna take you up on a mountain bike lesson and ride Highline together.
I gotcha. I gotcha
That'd be
for sure.
awesome. And I couldn't agree more with the West Sedona side. And what I really like about that side too is, like, you don't really need to plan that much. You can just kind of go.
Hmm.
Anytime you want to shorten it, there's really great connectors to make it a short ride, or you can check in with yourself and say, I'm feeling great, I'm going to add on another loop, go further out. I
Yep.
absolutely love that system. Um,
Yep. Yep.
it is really incredible compared to the Oak Creek side, where it could be a little bit crowded because you have a few more beginners
Hmm.
doing the cathedral loop. Um, there's probably, there's so much. Sedona's blowing up. What are some things that are there things that are coming to mind in Sedona with new riders that you'd like to share? We're really big on making sure that if we're sending anybody to new visitors to an area, or new to the outdoors, we want to make sure that we're doing leave no trace principles, responsible recreation. Are there things that come to mind specific to Sedona that you'd like to share with people that haven't ridden in Sedona before, um, or just in general, that's some challenges that Sedona trails are facing?
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't been to Sedona before, I mean, it has to be one of the most heavily recreated Forest Service districts in the United States. I mean, it's insane the amount of people that we come through here. But don't get me wrong, we have over 300 miles of single track here, so you can spread out that usage and you can still enjoy your ride. It's not like, I mean, even on our busiest days, I still enjoy when I go out and pedal. It's not too crowded. Um,
Absolutely.
but with that said, you're sharing the trail, right? You're sharing the trail with a lot of hikers, you're sharing the trail with bikers and even equestrians. So being able to use your trail etiquette is crucial here in Sedona just because you're going to have to. I mean, there's people out there. Um, so knowing the right of ways, being super polite and making sure that mountain biking maintains their access here, because the last thing we want to do is give mountain biking a bad name here in Sedona. So, during all of our lessons, we make sure that we lead by example by being super accommodating to other trail users and just being as positive of an influence as we possibly can, you know.
Awesome.
Uh, yeah.
And then
And then
obviously the cryptobiotic soil. If you
yeah,
can tell us a bit more about it, I'll probably won't do it justice.
yeah, no problem. Well, people are like, "What type of soil did you say?"
Exactly. It's like
Crypto
alien soil.
cryptobiotic soil. So, for the listeners out there, cryptobiotic soil essentially is the type of soil that we have um, in Sedona. And what it essentially is over time, it takes hundreds of years to develop. And basically, it catches water and nutrients in a certain way that it supports the plant life around it. Right. So it's this very fragile type of soil that we have that essentially collects water and nutrients. And that's why Sedona is so green, right? People come to Sedona and they're like, wow, I thought it was going to be the desert, just like a barren wasteland. But you come here and there's plant life everywhere. And that's what makes Sedona so magical. That's why we have vortexes here, right? Is because it's
Mhm.
so green and so full of life. And the reason for that is because of our soil. And so why this relates to mountain bike lessons is because we have to respect that soil. And so we always give a spiel before our lessons if we're going out on trail that we have to stay on the trail. All right, people are like, why can't I just go use the restroom out on, in the woods? Well, it's because you're going to be trampling on that cryptobiotic soil. So we have to use the bathrooms at the trailheads, and we have to make sure that when we stop, we're not pulling off onto that soil. We're just putting 1 foot off of the trail when we're pulling over. So there's lots of ways that we go through protecting our environment, and yeah, that soil is so important. So good, thanks for bringing it up.
No, thanks for sharing it. I think it's one of those things, because it has such an everlasting impact, and it's biotic, not bionic, which is like from Terminator 2, which is a different type of soil. um,
Yeah.
I thought it's really interesting because how long it takes for it to recover. I think that's what stayed with me is like 50 or 100 years or more for it to get back to its fully uh, developed form where it can, sustain that plant life. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
stepping on it or crushing it is not just like, hey, next year it's going to be back. It's gonna take a while. So let's do
Hmm.
our part to help protect it. Um,
Exactly.
what are some tips? So I really loved what you did with the bike lesson. Is not just about the skills, but you can help yourself out a lot by making sure that your bike is set up properly. So, what are some bike setup checklists that you guys go through? And I guess I'm setting it all up to be this is not just a mountain biking skills lesson. This is a overarching mountain biking lesson. It's body position, it's bike setup. What are some things that you guys go through
Yep.
in a bike setup that you could share with people that if they're uh, something they can take back and make sure that they're doing pre-ride?
Yeah, for sure. Um, So bike setup is so important because I think it's a common thread throughout mountain biking that you just kind of hop on and go. You know, you give the old tire the squeeze test and you're ready to rock. And what we try to stress is that that's just not good enough, right? Because it's like skiing on a different pair of skis, right? Or playing basketball with a basketball that's inflated differently. You have to have that consistency in order to play your best. And so that's what we stress with our bike setup. And where we start is always with um, tire pressure, knowing your tire pressure, and we stress having an actual digital gauge, not just using a floor pump or giving the squeeze test. So knowing your numbers, right? What is your front tire pressure versus your back? Um, and then we move on to your fork and your shock pressure, knowing what that needs to be. And it's all about establishing a baseline, and that goes for tire pressure and shock pressure. Starting somewhere and then adjusting to find your sweet spot, because the recommended pressure, I don't use what the recommended pressure is. I had to find what works for me, right?
Sure.
So we try to dial that in with all of our lessons and make sure that people are feeling good with their mountain bikes. And then the last and most important part of it is knowing that you have to check it before every ride.
Mhm.
And that's because when you drive to trailheads, you're gaining or losing elevation, temperature changes. That changes the air pressure in your tire and your suspension as well. So there's lots of factors that are going to fluctuate with your bike. And the only way that I feel comfortable riding is knowing, right before I ride, I check everything. And it's just a habit. It's a successful habit that you get into as you become a good rider.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's the main part is just doing it every single time. So it just becomes part of the routine, just like throwing your helmet on or anything else. So
Yep.
uh, this is super helpful. If I could not encourage enough people to go out and take a lesson, and if you don't find value in it, you can come back and tell me, and I'll give you your money back. This is not offer void in Utah. But seriously, it's incredible. I'm gonna we're gonna really emphasize lessons on Trip Outside because that is something not just for beginners, but just more enjoyable ride when you're out there. You're more likely to stay in the sport. You can also enjoy the sport more, get over more features, try new trails. Personally, for me, the being able to go up technical features was one of my favorite things that I got out of it because I was able to compress right before, or you can pump right before you get to the technical feature, and it makes it so much easier to ride over it. And that was something I was personally struggling with. So if
Right.
you're listening to this, get out there, get a lesson. If you're visiting Sedona, what an incredible way to check out the trails. You can go out and learn about the trails, you ride, and then you spend the next few days, go out there crushing on yourself. Maybe you get a couple hours or a half day or a full day. Check out Sedona Mountain Bike Academy. I will ask one thing I forgot to uh, ask is what are the different types of lessons that you guys offer? What are all the
Sure.
options for someone that's visiting?
Yeah. So we have private lessons running year round. So anytime you come into Sedona, you can book a private instructor for yourself. We also do group lessons. So we have a group lesson rate. If you have a few friends and you want to come in with like four of your buddies, it's actually really, really quite affordable. If you get the more people you have, the more affordable it becomes. So that's a fun way to grab a bunch of friends and learn some skills. And then we run or I would say we'll probably have 5 to 6 skills clinics running this fall. We take a little breather in the summertime just because it's so hot here. But once the fall kicks in, we'll be having 2 day skills clinics over the fall. So those are just like total immersive experience where we go through everything from bike setup, bike maintenance, fundamental skills, um, progression sessions. We have a bike park session. So you really get the full gamut of what we teach throughout the weekend. And then, of course, we have our amazing youth development program. So anytime that you bring your kids through, we may be having some weekly youth sessions going on where we ride at the bike park or we take them out on trail, and that'll be happening this fall as well. So
That's
lots of
incredible.
lots of ways to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think a group lesson is fun, but if you're not sure if you want to go with a bunch of people, just grab an individual lesson, and it really does make your entire mountain biking experience much more enjoyable. Um, Evan, thanks so much for all the tips and all the helpful uh, sharing all your knowledge over the years. And even if somebody doesn't go physically take a lesson, hopefully that's found a lot of value in this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to when we can ride again.